Eddie Van Halen revolutionized the guitar, changed rock forever, inspired millions with that infectious grin and those mind-bending solos. But behind the legend was something darker. Six guitarists he couldn't stand, heroes who broke his heart, rivals who stole his sound, and one competitor he could never escape. What you're about to hear isn't the story they tell in Rolling Stone. This is about betrayal, cold shoulders, and the brutal price of being a genius. Because the truth is, Eddie Van Halen didn't just battle the guitar. He battled the gods who taught him how to play it. Pasadena, California, late 1960s. A teenage kid sits alone in his bedroom with a cheap guitar and a stack of Cream records worn from endless replays. Night after night, Eddie Van Halen drops the needle on Crossroads, trying to capture every bend, every fiery lick from Eric Clapton's Les Paul. He's obsessed. Clapton isn't just an influence. He's the reason Eddie picked up the guitar in the first place. I used to sit there for hours trying to figure out what he was doing, Eddie once said. He was God to me. For years, that's all Eddie wanted. To understand what made Clapton's playing feel alive. The phrasing, the sustain, the pauses. It shaped everything about his musical DNA. But here's what nobody tells you about meeting your heroes. Sometimes they destroy you. By 1978, Eddie had done something even Clapton hadn't. He reinvented the electric guitar. When Eruption hit, it sounded like it came from another dimension. Two-handed tapping, harmonic squeals, dive bombs that defied physics. Suddenly, this shy kid from Pasadena became the future of rock. Fans worshipped him. Critics called him a revolutionary. But not everyone cheered. When Clapton was asked about Van Halen in 1980, his response cut like a blade. He's very good technically, but I don't hear much soul. Those words shattered Eddie. It was heartbreaking, he admitted years later. I learned everything from him. I wasn't trying to outplay him. I was inspired by him. To hear that he didn't like what I was doing really got to me. Imagine that. Your idol, the man who taught you to dream, dismisses your life's work as mechanical, soulless. And there's nothing you can say back because he's Eric Clapton, and you're still just the kid who learned from his records. But that heartbreak was only the beginning. Meeting Ritchie Blackmore should have been a moment of triumph. The dark wizard of Deep Purple, the haunting genius behind Highway Star and Burn. Eddie had studied every note, replayed those solos until his fingers bled. And when Van Halen's debut exploded in 1978, Eddie was suddenly standing alongside the men he'd idolized. He wasn't a kid with a Strat copy anymore. He was a peer, a chart-topping guitarist rewriting the rules. Then he finally met Blackmore, and the man just stared at him. Wouldn't say hi. Nothing. I was crushed, Eddie recalled. I thought, wow, I looked up to this guy my whole life, and he just blew me off. That silence hit harder than any insult. Eddie wasn't arrogant. He was open, eager, the kind of guy who could talk gear and pick up wiring for hours. But Ritchie gave him ice. Years later, when asked about Van Halen, Blackmore's response felt like both compliment and dagger. He's a fine player, but I think he plays too many notes. Too many notes. As if innovation was excess. As if freedom was a mistake. And Blackmore wasn't alone. Joe Perry from Aerosmith did the same thing. People like Joe Perry would just give me the shaft with their eyes, Eddie said. Wouldn't say hello. Wouldn't be nice. Nothing. Here was this young prodigy tearing through solos like his life depended on it, and the heroes whose posters hung on his wall wouldn't even look his way. No nod, no smile, just cold, unreadable stares. Eddie understood what it meant. They saw him as a threat. They wouldn't go out of their way to help anybody because they would feel threatened. It wasn't just rejection. It was a generational war. The old guard was blues and swagger. The new guard was speed, precision, sonic experimentation. Eddie's style wasn't an evolution to them. It was an invasion. But what hurt even worse than coldness was theft. Late 1970s, Van Halen and Boston are sharing a bill. Sunny afternoon show, beers flowing, the crowd buzzing. Eddie finishes his solo, raw and fearless, dripping with adrenaline. The audience is still roaring. Then Tom Scholz from Boston steps up, and he plays Eddie's solo, note for note. I was standing on stage, Eddie said, and the whole crowd was looking at me like, what's this guy doing? I was drunk. I got pissed. Scholz, the MIT-trained perfectionist who built Boston's sound in a basement lab, wasn't trying to steal thunder. He was just wired differently. Precision, control, formulas. Everything Eddie wasn't. But watching someone mirror his sound felt like watching a stranger wear his face. There's a difference between inspiration and duplication, Eddie said. If you don't evolve, you're just tracing someone else's shadow. And yet, even that anger paled compared to what came next. Rick Derringer is opening for Van Halen. Derringer's a veteran, a respected player, someone Eddie grew up admiring. After the show, Eddie walks into the bar, still wired from the set. He finds Derringer and the words tumble out. "Hey Rick, I grew up on your stuff. How can you do this? I don't care if you use the technique. Don't play my melody." Eddie's voice carries three emotions at once: admiration, betrayal, and a demand for respect. He isn't angry that Derringer used tapping. He's angry that he copied his solo note for note, melody for melody, in front of the same audience that just watched Van Halen. Inspiration is one thing. Replication is theft. The next night, Derringer does it again. Same notes, same phrasing. Even closes with "You Really Got Me," a song Van Halen had already turned into their anthem. Eddie's patience snaps. "If you're going to keep doing that, you ain't opening for us." And just like that, Derringer is off the tour. For Eddie, this wasn't ego, it was survival. Van Halen was still carving its place in history, and Eddie's sound, that volcanic energy, was the heart of it. Seeing it mimicked so bluntly felt like watching someone steal his identity. But the rivalry that haunted Eddie most wasn't about imitation, it was about reflection. Early 1980s. Two guitar prodigies stand at the center of rock's storm. Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads. Both young, both revolutionary, both being compared endlessly. And for Eddie, those comparisons cut deep. He was one guitarist who was honest anyway, Eddie said, because he said everything he did, he learned from me. He was good, but I don't really think he did anything that I haven't done. Classic Eddie, half compliment, half challenge. You learned from me. It wasn't arrogance. It was Eddie reclaiming authorship of the revolution he started. Tapping, dive bombs, harmonic squeals. All those techniques were suddenly everywhere, and some of those echoes were coming from Randy's fingertips. Ozzy Osbourne later fired back. "I heard Eddie Van Halen said he taught Randy all his licks," Ozzy said. Randy didn't have a nice thing to say about Eddie. Maybe they had a falling out, but they were rivals. There's even a story that Randy's guitar tech taped a photo of Eddie to the bottom of Randy's wah pedal. Every time Randy stepped on it, he was literally stomping on Eddie. It was playful, maybe, but also telling. Beneath Eddie's frustration was something human: vulnerability. He wasn't just a guitar god. He was a man who changed the language of rock and was suddenly hearing that language spoken back at him by someone else. And maybe that's what stung most. Randy was that good. Good enough to mirror him, good enough to threaten him. Then tragically, Randy Rhoads died in a plane crash in 1982. The rivalry froze in time. Unresolved, eternal. And for Eddie, that loss probably added another layer he could never untangle. How do you resolve feelings towards someone who's gone? You can't. In later years, Eddie's tone softened. The bite faded into quiet reflection. Maybe he understood that rivalry and respect were two sides of the same coin. That the reason it mattered so much was because Randy was that good. And maybe, just maybe, Eddie didn't hate Randy Rhoads at all. Maybe he saw too much of himself in him. That reflection was both admiration and discomfort in equal measure. Looking back, Eddie's rivalries reveal something deeper than ego. They reveal a man fiercely protecting what he'd built. A sound, an identity, a revolution. He'd soldered his own pickups, blown up his own amps, invented his own techniques. And when heroes dismissed him, when peers copied him, when rivals mirrored him, it wasn't just about music. It was about survival. Because being a genius means being copied. Being revolutionary means being dismissed. And being Eddie Van Halen meant carrying all of that with a grin, even when it broke his heart. He gave the world a new language for the guitar. And in return, the world gave him coldness, theft, and endless comparison. But through it all, Eddie kept playing, kept inventing, kept chasing sounds nobody else could find. "You can copy the licks," he once said, "but not the spirit." And that's what music is. Spirit. In the end, That's what separated Eddie from everyone else. Not the technique, not the speed, the spirit, the fire that couldn't be taught, borrowed, or stolen. The thing that made him Eddie Van Halen, and the thing that, no matter how many tried, nobody could ever truly take away.